I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. My parents, my mum comes from Kingston, and dad comes from St Andrews. When I was about 3 years old, my parents decided to immigrate to England, and that was the last I saw of them as a 3-year-old.
So, Errol, I take it, like you said, you were 3 years old in Jamaica, so you can you remember much, not much about it?
Not much at all.
Okay, you say it was the last time you saw of your parents. Does that mean that your parents came first to England? Could you tell us the reason why and what happened after that, why they chose England?
Well, obviously you find these things out at a later date in life, but according to my parents, what was said was work was offered in this country, and they saw it as an opportunity to better themselves and also to give a better opportunity for the family. There was 4 of us, 3 boys and 1 girl at the time, in Jamaica, so they were looking for the future for us.
So you say 3 boys and a girl. So where are you along the line? Are you third one down, or?
I was the youngest.
The youngest.
Yes.
Right. So your parents, you said, decided to come because of opportunities in work. Could you tell us what year they came, and then what year you arrived, whether all the family came or what?
They came 57, and then I came in 62.
Okay. So could you tell me about your journey then? Your arrival, how you came, did you came by yourself, sister, brother, or whatever?
We all travelled together, but it was the circumstances of how we travelled was in the local community. It's as though my auntie, who I was living with, and my grandma didn't really want people to know that we were leaving, so they didn't tell nobody. And all we were told is that tomorrow you're going to your parents, and clothes were packed in our suitcase. We were taken the following day to Kingston Airport, put on a plane, all 4 of us. Obviously my older brother was responsible for all of us. And when I was told I was going to England, I started crying. And I cried all the way from Kingston to England, because it dawned on me that I wouldn't see the people I knew again, or my friends. They didn't know I was going, and I didn't have a chance to even tell them that I was going. And you feel as though you've been robbed. That's all been taken away from you because that's what your parents wanted, or that's what the adults wanted.
Okay, so you all came together. So what age range was your eldest brother and your sister?
My brother was 14. My sister was, and the other brother was 12. My sister was 10, and I was 9. Okay. So there was, a few years between us.
So at the age of 9 you came over then, okay. Could you tell us something about your actual arrival, where you landed and what you thought and what happened from there? How did life start when you arrived?
It was January 62, cold. And obviously coming from the Caribbean, you're not used to the cold weather. So we were told by the air stewardess that we need to put on some thick clothing because we had sort of short sleeve shirts and shorts on. So we had some winter clothes which we changed in. And as the plane was coming into land at Heathrow, I can remember seeing these chimneys with smoke coming out of them, but there was quite a few of them. And I just couldn't understand why they've got so many factories in the country, not knowing that they're all houses. And as we got nearer to the ground in the plane, I also saw these double-decker buses, and it was like one up, one down, and I thought, well, it must be two drivers, you know. We landed at the airport, and as the door opened, I remember this sharp, cold breeze just hit us, and I thought, oh no, what are we coming to? And we were met at the airport by our parents, and that was the first time I'd seen them, in fact, get to know them since they left us in '57.
So the age range, you said that they left when you were 3 years old.
Yeah.
So there was a gap of 6 years of
Yes.
not knowing.
Not knowing. That's right. Apart from seeing photographs,
Okay.
you know. And
Okay. So what happened from there, Errol, when your parents came and met you at the airport? Could you tell us what happened and where you settled, or
Right.
eventually settled in England?
right, they came to fetch us at the airport, and it was strange because there'd been a 6-year gap. I didn't really know them. So it was like, hello, and this is your mom and that's your dad. And for the first time I saw what they really looked like in the flesh. We were then taken to the car, and it was the old Zodiac, I think it was Zodiac car. We went in that and we drove from London to Wolverhampton, which the journey was about 3.5 hours or so. And then we arrived home, and obviously you think to yourself, well, is this where I'm living? And obviously things look different. There's snow on the ground, and the shape of the houses were different, you know. So I was like curious and amazed to see the designs, because where we were coming from was like mostly bungalow type houses, none of these high-rise flats or 2-3-story buildings.
So let me just clarify, the type of house you lived in, was it a terraced or was it a flat?
It was a semi-detached house. It was those that were all in twos, you know, and there was a gap between each pair.
Right. So your parents brought you to this semi-detached house. Whereabouts in Wolverhampton do you?
Blake and all. Blake and all.
Right, okay. Could you tell us a bit about Blake and all itself, or can you have any memories there?
Yeah.
What it was like, whether it was your parents' house, council rented, or what?
It was our parents' house, and I suppose in those days I think they bought it for £1,500 or something like that.
Which was still a lot of money.
A lot of money, yeah. But they got somewhere for us, because other people who had just come to the country were actually still renting rooms and so on. So we were fortunate enough to know that we were going to our own house. When we got to the house, we had a lodger there. There's a lodger living in the downstairs front room. So we were introduced to them. And the area itself, I think after a couple of days, we decided to go wandering in the snow. And it was like picking up snow, feeling what it was like, putting it in our mouths. And, you know, it was really strange because we had never seen snow. The only snow we saw was on the top of Blue Mountain hill in Jamaica. But we never did go to the peak to touch the snow, but we knew it was there. The area was, I remember the trolley bus that was on this sort of overhead cable, and this bus and sparks were coming from it. And I thought, well, couldn't understand how that operated, but it must be powered by that thing that took it along. And it went from the town centre to Dudley, because it was along the Dudley Road. So that was an experience.
Did you get to go on the trolley bus by the way?
Not immediately, no. It was, I would say, maybe 2 weeks before we actually went on the trolley bus for about 2p to town. It terminated at CNA by the Garmont cinema. I remember it well.
Tell me a bit more about your family then. You said that they bought their own house. Presumably they must have saved a part to pay for all.
Yeah. What they told me was that they were living in rented or a lodger in other black people's houses, and they'd lived in about 3 houses until they could afford to buy their own. And they worked shifts. Like my dad worked in the day, and my mum worked at night, and he worked at C&B Smith's Iron Founders, and my mum worked at the die casting factory, which is on the Penn Road. It's gone now. Safeways has built a superstore on it. But yes, that's how they managed to save and survived.
Okay. What about education? Can you remember much about your school days?
Right. I remember the first day of going to the junior school, because my mum says you're going to the school today, see what it's like, because next week you're starting. So I went to the school and we met with the headmaster. And one of the things that stuck in my mind was, as I was walking through the corridors of the school, all the children kept looking at me. And I felt as though, must be something different, because I felt like, I suppose, like an alien E.T. landing, and everybody is just curious. And that stuck in my mind. All these kids were looking at me curiously to say, well, there's a black person, and if as though they'd never seen one. So that was an eye-opener. So I wasn't looking forward to going back to school because of that bad experience, but I had to go.
Were there other black kids there?
There was one more black girl. Heather, her name was. I can't remember her surname, but Heather, her name was. And we both ended up in the same class. So I felt on the first day, having another black person in the same class, at least I've got somebody to talk to. During the break time of that first morning at school, out in the playground, it's cold. And I thought to myself, have I got to stand out here in the cold? But they had a system where you go out. He didn't come back in until the playtime had finished. So I was out there in the cold. And most of the kids kept coming up to me and touching my hair and saying it feels like wool, you know what I mean? And asking me all sorts of questions, where you're from, and when did you come? And I was like, I was just curious to know, why is it they wanted to know so much about me? And as you're growing up, you realise that it's because they may have seen black people on television, but never in real life, and that was their first experience of black people.
So, what was your experience throughout your education? I mean, you started this school. How did you settle in? What was your relationship with the children, and up to the very day you left school?
I found
something about your school.
I found it very difficult to settle in the school, because the language that they were using wasn't familiar to the language I was using in Jamaica, in the Jamaican school system. So I found it difficult to adapt. My reading wasn't brilliant, my writing wasn't brilliant. In fact, I was struggling to understand the things that the teachers were saying. And I felt I was like writing the way I was speaking, because the patois was still in the system and it was difficult to get it out. Although my parents kept saying, you don't speak like that, you know what I mean, and try to discourage you from speaking patois. You know, you must speak English, and I struggled with that.
What about your junior, second school, and maybe college if you went to? Did
Right.
you progress?
Right.
Was it?
When I left the junior school at 11, I remember some of the children in the class said they had to do their 11 plus, and I was curious to find out what this 11 plus was. But they said it was like an exam to go into a higher school. So when I asked, do I have to take this exam? They said no. You'll just go to another school, which is a secondary school, which was Graiseley. So I think the teacher thought that I wasn't ready for an 11 plus, so they didn't encourage it. So I went to Graiseley Secondary School, which wasn't far from where I lived. I was quite happy with that. My older brother was there, so again, I was going into a secondary school, that there will be somebody there to protect you in a sense, or to talk to. That wasn't a bad experience because there was more older and black children in that school. So I felt a little bit better in that school. And to be honest, I felt once I started to socialise with those black children who had come from Jamaica as well as I did, you tend to get a little bit more confident in yourself and in what you were doing. And I started to improve in terms of my schoolwork and academic. And I remember in my first year, there was 26 of us in the class. At the end of the year, I came second at the 26. And I thought to myself, I'm doing very well here. And then in the second year of the school, I think I finished about third or fourth in the class, highest in terms of marks. So I wasn't doing too bad. In my third year, I didn't do too well. And I enjoyed going to school, didn't miss a day. And it was this socialisation, this mixing with others that I enjoyed going to school for, not so much the school work. And in that third year, my work suffered because I was easily distracted. Teacher, I remember all the comments, and I still have my report book now that says, could try harder or easily distracted, can do better work. And I still have it now, and I look through it and I think to myself, well, yeah, that was part of growing up, but I enjoyed my secondary school years.
And you got on okay with the teachers?
Got on very well with teachers, and as usual, because I was good at sports, I got on well with the sports teacher. Practical things like woodwork, I did well in that, because I could make things, so I did well there. Science, I didn't do too bad. Came second in the class for science. My maths wasn't brilliant, but I got through that. So after the third year, the bad year I had was the third year, but after that, I was about an average student, average pupil. But I wanted to leave school because my friends were leaving school when we reached the fourth year. I didn't want to stop on to do, which was then, was it the O-levels? To do O-levels. I just wanted to get a job, have some nice clothes, and have some money in my pocket. Because right through my school life, I didn't have much of those. and I just wanted to leave and go and work. So in terms of education or A levels or O levels, no, that wasn't me. So I left school at 16 and enrolled on a college course to do City and Guilds carpentry and joinery, because I was good at practical things, so I thought I'd do this. And I got a job with a woodwork company, and I was with them for about six years after leaving school. So that was me.
Okay. So you left school without qualifications.
That's right.
What's not carpentry?
City and Guilds carpentry.
Got a job.
Got a job.
Carpentry.
And I was just.
How long did you stay in this job, and
For
where
about,
did you go from there?
stopped in the job for about 6 years. And after 6 years, I think, again, as you're growing up, you realise that you're beginning to understand the systems and the way things operate and the way factories take people on and sack them. And I thought, well, I haven't got no education, and in order to get a better job, I need to do something. So one day, I was still living with my parents, giving them, I think, 10 bob a week and keeping the rest for myself. I decided to pack this job in. So I packed the job in, and they all thought I was mad. You know, you're packing in a good job with good money, it's not far from home, and all these things. And I said, I need to do something, I need to push myself, because I haven't done so. And I've left school, these 6 years on. I'm 22, so I need to do something. So I joined the Territorial Army, because it was like discipline and adventure, and I thought that would be useful. I then decided to help out at the YMCA, doing voluntary youth work, and enrolled at college to do some O levels, because I knew I hadn't got nothing, so I had to start with English O level, sociology, psychology, and I think social admin. Those are the 4 O levels I did at Bilston College. And I suppose you'll say to yourself, well, how did he find time to do all these things? But I'd worked it out that I could do the college work in the day, I could do the Territorial Army in the one evening a week and possibly weekends, and the other couple of days I went and did work with the YMCA, voluntary work. And that's how I sort of got through. And after 3 years of doing those things, I got my O levels. Continued doing the voluntary youth work. At this time, they've offered me payment money to do it, and I stuck with the Territorial Army. I felt I wanted to stick with the Territorial Army because I felt, because of that discipline, I started to get some discipline in my own life. And I was like going on weekend camps with them, going to Germany, I went to Austria, and I did quite a bit of training, adventure training, hill walking, rock climbing, canoeing, and I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I hadn't joined. And I ended up being a sergeant major in the Territorial Army, and I was the only black sergeant major in that brigade, and it was like amazing. And my commanding officer said, the next stage for you would to become an officer. And I thought, yes. And they were paying me at this time for that, so I was being paid for my youth work, and I know I'm being paid for Territorial Army. So I thought, yes. So he sent me to Sandhurst. And Sandhurst is the officer training college in Surrey. That's where all the officers do their army training. And I went there just for a 2-week training course, just to taste out what it was like if I wanted to become an officer. And it was tough. It was very tough, because if you're going to be an officer, you have to be a leader of men. And they felt that I had the leadership potential. But when I was there the 2 weeks, the training was like you were given instructions, you had a map and a compass, you had the equipment, and you had the food to last you the 2 weeks. And you had to do these obstacle courses, initiative tests, sleep out at night, work out how you would cross rivers by being given 4 drums and some planks and some rope. And I've never been tested so much in my life. And I felt that was like really hard, but I got through that. And when I came back after the training, I said to my officer that, to be honest, I don't think this is for me. And I don't think I'd want to pursue a career in the army, because Northern Ireland was about then. If you joined the army, you had to serve time in Northern Ireland. And when I checked it out, I filled in the application form to join up as a regular soldier, got a JP to countersign it, did my medical, did the tests, and then changed my mind. Because I thought to myself, I'm not fighting a war for people who I don't know. So that was my reason. So I finished with the Territorial Army and just stuck to youth work. I thought I was comfortable helping young people and organising things for them. So I stuck to that, and that was 2 nights a week.
What age were you then?
About 26 then.
Okay.
I was 26. So I was a late developer.
So, did you say you eventually ended up with a job with youth work, or was it just paid voluntary work you did?
Right. The youth leader at the time, a chap called Mike Todd, said, because I was doing a lot of organising of activities, I was running the football team for the youth club. I suppose he thought I had that leadership quality, and that was just coming with me because I was in the Territorial Army, so I had that sort of organising ability. And he said, have you ever thought about doing youth work, because the YMCA run a course on youth work, so do you want to do that? And I thought, oh no, because I had a bad experience at school. And he explained to me what was involved, the essays and observational visits and all these things. And I thought, no, I don't want to go into that. And there was a fear of education, really. It was a fear of, although I'd done all my O levels, I still wasn't that confident. I was just glad to get that out of the way. So I sort of delayed taking on that full-time course, until one day the youth service put out an advert to all the staff, because the youth service were sponsoring the YMCA youth club. So I was paid by the youth service, and the circular came around to say they're looking for full-time youth workers, and training would be offered to these unqualified workers. And I thought, well, here's an opportunity. It's been about 2 or 3 years since the youth leader had mentioned it to me. I thought, give it a go. So I applied for the job. And there were, I think about 25 people applied, but there were about 4 places up for grabs. So at the 25, I was one of those selected to be taken on as a unqualified worker and training be offered. Yeah. So for the first year I was like an apprentice with the youth service. And I was really chuffed because I felt as though I'd achieved something. And again, I think it's this, having that discipline about yourself, or preparing yourself for interviews, and having your self-belief and self-discipline, how to sell yourself. And I'd learned, and I was sort of encouraged by other people, a woman called Chris Merricks from Saints Youth Club, when that was going. She was, I think, instrumental in me and Mike Todd, those 2 people. And those people you don't forget, because those people really sort of say, well, yeah, they spot something in people and they encourage it. And I think that's what I've developed as well,
we'll go on to your social life, but I'd like to get back into your youth work as well, just to see whether you progress from there. But what about your social life? Did you get involved? Like, did you go to church? Did you do any other things besides voluntary work?
Right. Only went to church when first came to this country, when your parents say, every Sunday you will go to church. So it wasn't the case of having a choice. I just had to go. But as I grew a bit older, I thought, well, no, this isn't for me. When you're forced to go somewhere, you then rebel and say you don't stick to it. So I didn't attend church that frequently, only weddings, funerals and christenings, or special occasions. I went to church. So I didn't see myself as a religious person, but I do believe in God, and I always question, well, do I have to go to church to believe in God? So I just thought, as long as you're a believer, so I didn't attend church.
So when you say that your voluntary work was mainly your social life?
The voluntary work, most of my time was spent doing voluntary work, where all my other friends used to go out to roller skating and all the other things that normal young people do. But I wanted to, in the early stages when I used to go around with them, we used to play football, go to West Park and do those sort of things. But when I realised that I was with a group of people who were very strong, and the parents always says you can be led, and this group could lead me astray easily, because I was vulnerable, gullible. And I remember, and what brought it home to me was one night, we always walk around in groups because we felt safe walking around in groups. But by walking around in groups, there were the mods and rockers, and the teddy boys, and the bikers. And the bikers used to meet at Temple Street, Darlington Street. So we always kept away from there. We didn't walk that way in groups, Certain places we didn't go. But the Rollerdrome was one place which was on Temple Street that we frequently went to. It was like one of the meeting places. And one night, one of my friends got racially abused and beaten up in there. So we all, we weren't with him at the time, but he came down to the park. We always meet in the park, play football. He came down and he was like blood everywhere. And so we all gathered the posse and we went up to Temple Street, and we had all the security people outside the Rollerdromes, and they're all white, there's no black security. And they threatened to call the police, and we said, one of you lot beat one of ours up, and it was like, so what? What are you going to do about it? And we just thought, we've got to take revenge somehow. So the churchyard, which is it St John's? St John's Church, St John's Square. There was a building site there at the time, and there was loads of bricks and everything. We all marched up to St John's Church, and everybody grabbed a load of bricks, and we hurled them through the big windows of the Rollerdrome. And then we legged it. And as we legged it down Merrydale Street, because we heading towards St Chad's, the police are chasing us as well. And they caught one of my mate, but they didn't catch me, because we all split up, and one was caught. And it was like, from then I knew that if I'd stuck with this group, that I'd get myself in trouble. And I was like, glad to get home that night, not telling your parents nothing, you know what I mean? But just glad to know that you wasn't one of those who were caught or got into trouble. Because I know if I'd got into trouble, you'd get a beating on top of it, you know what I mean? Because our parents believed in discipline. So from then on, my social life with my peers were limited, because I just didn't want to get in trouble. So.
Okay. In terms of life itself, life, getting on with society and people, did you come across any conflicts, or did you find that you just got on with life and there was no hassle or whatever? Was there anything that you felt that stood out for you as an individual, that person?
Yeah, as I was growing up, I realised that obviously racism, because at school you're all mixed together, but then when I had a few fights at school, and it was round name calling, that there were certain white pupils who called us names, and we didn't stand for it, so we would fight. And then when you fight, you were the one who ended up in trouble in the headmaster's office for fighting. But I noticed that the perpetrators always got away with it, and we were classed as the troublemakers. So really, from that point of view, I was beginning to understand that these forces are out there. It started from school, in your social life, walking with your friends, group of black kids, you're going to be targeted, call names, and that did happen. But we tried to, just call names back. Occasionally we got violent and fights, and but I wouldn't say nothing. The most serious time, I think, was a friend of ours got stabbed by one of the bikers, Temple Street, and we had a good communication system. There was no mobile phone or nothing like that, but we knew where everybody was, because most of the black kids used to meet in West Park. Right by the benches, the little shed in West Park was the meeting place. And when you got there was groups of us playing football, some doing this, playing cards, you know what I mean? So if you wanted everybody, you know where they were. So we ran down there, we told them that this chap had been stabbed. And we need to go up and sort these guys out. So everybody sort of got a weapon of some sort, whether it was a knife, whether it was sticks, whether it was bottles, stones. And there was like 200 of us marching up to Temple Street. And when we got up there, the police was waiting for us and sort of told us to, disperse, or else we'll all be arrested. And I remember Chester Morrison, he was like, because he was like the community leader of, at that time. And Chester knew how to communicate with the police, and you know what I mean? And he was saying, well, he was unhappy with the way what had happened, and we need to find out who did it, blah, blah, blah. And we're not happy, and we're going to riot. And, he was really threatening. And the police said, we better not, we'll all end up in jail that night. So Chester sort of spoke to the police in charge, and then sort of spoke to the mass and said, look, let's cool it, they're going to deal with it. Although there was a few people, who were still angry and wanted to take the law into their own hands. But that was the most frightening. But nothing became of that.
So those sort of things you've dealt with at school, and as you grew up, got a job, is it right in saying there was sort of your daily life encounters where you learned to deal with name calling and whatever? Going back to your youth work now, you said you got a job as a youth worker. I take it with whom?
Well, it was then the adult education, Old Hall Street, the adult college, because the adult college were where the youth service was operated from.
Was that part of Wolverhampton College? I mean Wolverhampton Borough Council?
Yeah, it was education.
Okay, education.
It's education.
Okay. What year was that?
82.
82.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that you're still with the council, or have you moved on?
I'm with the same department, although it's been reorganised over the years. But it's the same department, same council that I'm presently with now.
And what's your position? Have you been able to progress?
Right.
Has it been quite a hard struggle to get where you are?
I think if I say it hasn't been an hard struggle, I wouldn't be telling the truth. It's been exceptionally hard. For black people, it is still hard, regardless what you hear or read or what people say. It is hard within any of the institution to progress. But because of my self-belief and self-discipline, and again, this is where the army little bit came in, I set myself certain targets, and I thought first target was to get through the training as an unqualified, get through the training, and it was a 2-year training course, and I did it in Wrexham College. And I went away Mondays and I came back on Fridays for 2 years. So that was my priority, and I got through that course. I then came back to work, and I was moved from where I'd started. I started in Bilston, and I was moved to Blakenhall. So I was back into the area where I came to when I first came to this country. I spent 2 years in Blakenhall, and then another position came up in Pendiford for a senior youth worker, and I applied for that, and I got it. So then a progression again from the course, first job, senior worker. I was a senior worker for a number of years, and the area youth officer left, and there was a secondment for an area youth officer for 12 months. And I thought, if I did this, if I could get this job, this would go on my CV and good experience, help me to move on. So I applied for that, again with other people, and I got that job as an area youth officer for 12 months. Then the service reorganised, and then there were not enough management jobs. There were too many managers and not enough jobs. So I applied for one of the area managers' job, and I ended up having the assistant manager's job. And so I've ended up in this area of the southeast of Bilston as the assistant area manager. So I've progressed through, but I still find difficulties within the management system to progress, because if you look at the structure, we've got very few senior management, black senior managers in the service. And we need to have more, because we need to be in that position of power, influence, in order to make changes, so.
Coming into the end now, your reflection of your arrival in Wolverhampton, what have been any changes, if any, you could remember? I mean, obviously the year you arrived and looking at the year you are still now here, what other sorts of changes have you noticed that stands out most?
Right. A lot of the buildings that were prominent are mostly gone. There's still one or two of them that are still about. A lot of factories that employed a lot of our parents have all been knocked down or not there anymore. The transport system has improved, but I see that the metro is back, which reminds me of that trolley bus that I saw when I first came to this country, with the power overhead. Now it's back with us. So we've taken a complete 360 degree turn, and we're back in a sense to where we started. Communication vastly improved. The media, technology, computers, all these things didn't exist in the 60s, but they're here now. And I think it has been for the better. But I think what has been lost in all of that is that that self-belief or the understanding of where it is I'm coming from. And I know where I'm coming from. I was born in Jamaica. That's where I'm from. Where the kids who were born in this country, there's this confusion about, my parents keep telling me about Jamaica. I've never been, but I was born in this country, so I'm English. So if I have conflict with a white person or a white young person, they may call me a black bastard, but that, you know, I know that I'm English, so it's important that the present day young people, especially the Afro-Caribbean ones, get to understand their identity and where their parents are coming from and where they will fit in our society. But I'm glad that when I was born, the time I was born, because I think I've learned from that and I have no regrets. No regrets. So all I do now is pass on those skills onto my children and with the young people that I work with.
I'd just like to touch upon two of the things you said. You said about the change, the houses, they've changed.
Mm.
In what ways? Could you tell me?
Yeah, the high-rise blocks of flats that's come up where a lot of those weren't about then, in the 60s. They came around, I think it was the 70s, where these architects were given awards for who could get the most people, you know, that way. But unfortunately, it's proved that it was not the best way, and people have suffered because of that. You know, all sorts of ways they've suffered. And now what you find is a lot of the high-rise blocks have been knocked down and houses have been built where families and children will have a garden to play in and so on. But yes, but a lot of the old houses are still about, but they've been modernised, double glazing, no outside toilets, you know, and so on. So yes, I've seen the change.
The second one was, you talked about generation. People, African Caribbeans. What's the difference, can you detect, like your parents' generation, your generation, and say like the future generation? Is there any sort of effects and it's had upon you, concerns you have about?
Yeah. I've now got two children, two boys, who I have to sort of instill in them that life isn't what it looks like, and they need to be aware of what's happening in this big wide world of ours. So it's a case of educating them to ensure that they have this self-belief in themselves and knowing that they can achieve whatever they want to achieve without fearing the obstacles, the racism, discrimination, yeah? And learning how to handle rejection, because a lot of black people go through a lot of rejection, and some people do not know how to handle it, and they go lower and lower, where some people thrive on rejection, because when you know that you can do it, you got everything, but there's people who are stopping you from doing it. If you keep knocking not that door, eventually the door will open. That's my belief. So I'll instill that in my children. The Americanized systems, everything seems to be Americanized, because America being the world police force and the richest country, and in terms of music and fashion, they seem to be ahead of the game, and young people latch on to that, and everything seems to be Americanized. And again, you know, got no problem with young people and my children understanding the American way of life, but what they must understand is that as parents, or some parents, are not in a position to be able to afford all these modern and fashionable things, a pair of trainers for 80, £100, you know, if you're a single parent. And you've got 2 or 3 kids, you know, you have to work hard, you know, if you're on state benefits, then, you know, it's impossible. Then the children tend to think, my mum and dad can't afford it, and they're tempted to in terms of keeping up with their own peers, they may go and steal it, you know. So with my children, I try and instill in them that if you want something, you have to work for it. Nobody gets nothing in life for nothing. You have to put something in to get something out. And it's that sort of drugs and those sort of things also is a worry, because we hear about different types of drugs and you know, people dying from overdose of drugs. And again, if you make your children aware of these, what's out there, to say, well, look, you know, feel free to come and talk to me about whatever it is, yeah? Where I don't think I could have done that with my parents.
What's that? What is the difference? Was there a difference between your parents
and me? Yes, I think there is a difference because discipline. Because I saw my parents as disciplinarians. They were very, you know, so there was a fear of you weren't free to talk because they were so disciplined. So you wouldn't discuss things around sexual health, none of that. Everything I know is what I learned from my peer groups, you know. So, but now I can say to my children, if you want to know about it, we can talk about it and I will explain to you what is what and where you can go, or, you know, but if I don't know, I know somebody who can, you know. So it's just for me to be resourceful for them.
On a final note, to sum up, looking at the past and present, what are the main achievements you've achieved in your life which you can be very proud of? Apart from the territorial,
yeah.
Like you said you went through,
yeah.
That was something, getting your Sitting Guild certificate.
Right.
What else? I'm sure there are other things you've been involved
yeah.
in.
I was never one to boast or brag about what I got, because I felt because I had achieved it, it was mine. So therefore, I know I've got it, so I don't have to tell everybody that I've got it. There is cases and times when you do have to tell people that you've got it, especially at interviews, and that you're capable of doing. So I know when to use what I've got. Well, I've just done a management course, which leads on to a master's degree. I've just completed the first stage of that, you know. So I've got the certificate in management, which, you know, I feel that's an achievement. And I'm one of the few black managers in the service. There's only 3 of us. So I feel proud that, you know, I've progressed. But I felt I could have progressed further. But white people who are in the position of power and determine whether or not you move on or not, I feel they know where they want you in their organisation. So therefore, I feel the level I'm at now is where my management, senior management wants me. I'm not saying maybe if I'd gone outside of the authority, maybe that's the only regret. I felt I should have, and it's not too late, but I felt I should have gone outside of this authority to gain experience, and then maybe to come back. I think that was the only regret. But apart from that, I feel I've achieved quite a lot within this organisation, but most of all, the young people that I've worked with, I feel they've benefited from me being here, because I see them now walking through town and they all shout, you know, hey, you remember me? I was the one at the youth club that you used to run. And it gives you a buzz, you know, and it makes me feel as though, well, I couldn't have been that bad. I must have touched their lives, you know, and therefore that gives me a lot of satisfaction.
So there's the achievements you've achieved within the organisation. What about outside the organisation, in the community? What contributions? I'm sure there are things there which you probably felt that you have done outside of work. Are there any achievements you'd like to touch upon?
I still give certain times to the community. I'm on the board of management at the Afro-Caribbean Centre, and I do give them certain times every week, even now, and I see that as part of my community involvement. Yeah. so I'm still giving. What I've received in return, and I think this will stick to you, or stick with me for the rest of my life, is when I was awarded the Achievement Award from the Windrush organisation, because what that said was that we've recognised the work that we've contributed to the community, and we want everybody to know about it. Where before I didn't want nobody to know, I just plodded on. So that was, I think, to me, to be rewarded by the community for work done or for contribution. I think that's been the most appreciated out of everything else.
I remember that night, and I know you hiding your bush underneath the lights. Another achievement you in that book was that you're one of the few black referees.
That's right.
In football. Tell
Yeah.
us about
Oh,
that. Sorry about that. There we go.
Right. I've always loved sports, and I actually managed football teams, and I used to play myself, of course. And after I managed the football teams, local football teams, I decided that I wanted to do the referees course. And so I enrolled for the referees course and managed to be appointed to a match at Wembley Stadium, a youth international final. And to take my son along to walk on this turf of Wembley and to see the video after and, you know, the photograph, I think that was another achievement in my sporting career. But I still do now, I still coach young people in football coaching, because I've done some football coaching courses. And I encourage them to take up refereeing, because again, very few black people go into football refereeing. And if you start at a young age, you can make it to the Premier League, and it's rewarding. It's very stressful, but rewarding. Just think of yourself as being the person responsible for that game for 90 minutes. You are sole. Nobody can tell you what to do. You decide. And I think to me, I'm not after power, but it's a good feeling when you know nobody can influence your decision, and your decision is final. And I think that's why I encourage people to take up that if they can.
Okay, just a couple of more minutes, just to check. Did I hear that you received an award for referee and it was given by Bobby Charlton, or?
Oh, it was Bobby Moore.
Bobby Moore.
Bobby Moore, yes. Before, after the match, the players get their trophies, winners, runners up, and then the officials go up and receive theirs, and I was presented with mine by Bobby Moore, and to be presented by Bobby Moore, England captain, the only captain of the 1966 World Cup winning side. I think I really felt proud, and there was like 50,000 people in the stadium, you know, and it was like, bloody hell, what am I doing here? And to see a lot of the young people as well, because I took a group, well, I went the day before them, but they came down in a minibus the next day, and they were in the crowds waving at me, you know what I mean? You feel as though you're a celebrity, but that gave me a buzz to do that. But I enjoyed it.
Right, thank you very much, Alan.
Thanks for having me.